what is good about Pete's drumming, and a bit later we talk about the weaknesses, but what is actually good about his drumming. I would say he for straight rock and roll with no arty-farty, uh, he's all right, and in some aspects actually quite good. When that is said, you need to say he is not always absolutely tight, and he is not always keeping a steady tempo. There, so there's a little on in insecurity there in his playing, not to the extreme. And one thing more I think should be said. I think it is more obvious for younger listeners to hear that because of the things that had happened in the music in industry. It has become more and more usual to use drum machines. When it is actually a real drum player playing. To most things today, they are using a click track. So there are sort of things that keeps them to the beat. In my generation, we grew up with that there wasn't that thing, and it wasn't that unusual to hear music where the drummer was not 100% tight, and you could hear a lot of music where there was this kind of insecurity. So it was not that uncommon. So I think that should be mentioned, because those Sheridan sessions, when I first heard them, sometime there in the 70s, when I was a little boy, I went crazy for them, and I thought, wow, this is the best. And wow, I still love them, but today I can hear some things I didn't heard back then. But on some of the tracks, I actually think Pete is doing an okay job, I guess. And let's hear a little snip of My Bunny. Yes, you could hear there were some of those rolls there. My bunny. Well, you gotta understand me right. It's not like Billy Cobham or Elvin Jones or someone like that, but if you are not a drummer, you would probably not be able to do that. Just going over to a drum and saying, you should expect from most professional drummers that they are able to do that, but it takes some practice to actually achieve that. And I mean, it's good driving rock and roll, and it's very energetic, and it kind of works. Let me put it that way. Of course, today I can see some weaknesses in it that I couldn't see as a child. I have that. I got the single and I played it over and over again, and I loved it. Still do, but I can see some weakness in it today that I was aware of then. There's a pair of things I've got to say here, because I think actually that's some quite important things to put in. If any of you play music yourself, no matter on what level, you can be beginners or you can be on a very high level. No matter on what level you are, there's one thing I think you all have experienced, and that is about playing in different tempos. If you are about to play something fast, the problem can be, can you do it that fast? Or no matter what instrument it is. You need to, if it's gonna be fast, you have to be able to do it in that tempo. But the easy thing about that is that it's not that hard to keep the tempo and the beat. The slower it gets, the more difficult it is to keep the beat. And it's quite obvious why, because if you are counting 1, 2, 3, 4, I mean, you are almost, if it's that slow, you are almost sitting and waiting for that beat to come and say, when is it coming? And sitting, ding, no, and you say ding, and there was the beat. Oh shit! And the slower it gets, the more difficult it is to keep a steady beat. And I mean, when the tempo goes up, well, there's not much space to get in a wrong place. And even if you get in a wrong place, because the beats are so close to each other, it doesn't matter as much as if it's a slow song. And maybe if you recorded something very fast and you are not particular on the beat, well, if you recorded that and slowed the recording down, you could hear it would be like boom, 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 boom all the time. But when it goes up here, it's almost impossible to hear, because the beats are so close to each other that if you are just close to, it would sound like you are on the beat. So those who have some difficulties about being tight are usually working best at up the tempo things, because they can't fall so much wrong that they can in a slow song. That's one thing I want to mention. The other thing is that what you could call different feels and things. In straight rock and roll, there are this thing about it's like it's going straight forward. It's like straight forward, 100 miles an hour. And that's why many old school rock and roll fans often have some issues with more modern music, because there are some other rhythmic feels to it, often more complicated, but not necessary, sometimes just different. And it's not so much right forward. Sometimes it's more like going a bit to the one side and then to the other side, and it sometimes can feel like it's going in all directions and in no directions at the same time, and it's sort of a circulating thing in the air. I'm not saying it is, but it can feel that way for listeners who are used to that it's really much boom, 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 and straight ahead. It's like, oh, where are they going, and aren't they going anywhere, and such things. If you want to get an idea of what I'm talking about, you should try to compare something like those rockabilly acts, Carl Perkins, Eddie Cochran, such things, Dale Hawkins and his recording of Oh Susie Q, such things, and try to compare them with such a thing as what could U2, the Joshua Tree could be an example. And if you see on the differences there, I think you will get an idea of what I'm talking about. So if you are a straight rock and roll, if you are a fan of straight rock and roll, you would appreciate that just straightforward and not that complicated and not so much to it. It's just, and that's what it is, and that is kind of the quality of it. It has that energy, it has that drive, it is going right forward. So that's the good thing about it. Well, if you like that sort of stuff, of course. But that's the sort of thing that actually have that effect on many people, that they can't sit still. They kind of, oh, and hey, and they want to dance, and it makes you feel good. And isn't that a good thing, that it makes you feel good? I think that's a good thing. Well, you all have heard Ringo played straight rock and roll and doing a really, really good job. So it's not that, okay, he can't do that sort of thing. Oh, he can. But I think if you compare, I think it would be like Pete is very direct way taking this straightforward. And you could say in a bit of narrow way, it's like, okay, we going straight forward, but it's like it's a bit narrow way we are walking at straight forward. And Ringo is also pushing it straight forward, but it's like there are a bit more of a elasticity. He's more elastic, and it's kind of moving and swinging in another way. It's not just that poo poo poo. It's more like goom 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 goom. I don't know if this makes any sense. And one thing you can say about Ringo, there are no insecurities about the tempo. He is as tight as it gets. He is Mr. Tight. But one thing you could say is say, oh, he's not making all those. And, well, maybe he could do it, maybe he can't. But what I think is that it's not really a part of his style. The way he plays, his style of drumming, it wouldn't fit in his kind of doing the things. And so you can get, it's actually possible to get the idea that Pete got more speed than Ringo. I don't know, as I said, how much Ringo can do of all those things, but he doesn't do it very often, at least. And as I said, I don't actually think it would suit his style of drumming. It would be like some foreign thing put in to a very distinct style he got. But I can understand that some people, if they see an act of straight rock and roll and compare a session with Pete Best and a session with Ringo, that they can get that idea and feeling that, oh, Pete is faster. But it's more a question of style, I think. And even if Pete actually is faster, he is not as elastic and he is not as tight. That's for sure. But let's just say, okay, Pete can do these rolls, and that's what he is really, really good at. Let's accept that. And even those who think that is not true, well, let's take it just as hypothetic and as a thought experiment, saying it is so, and that's a fact. Well, let me put it this way. If you were opening a restaurant, well, of course you need to hire a cook, because without food, no restaurant. That should be obvious. Well, and here's one guy making some wonderful soufflés. But everything else he is doing is really not good. And here's that other guy, well, his soufflés are maybe just mediocre, but almost anything else is really, really good. Well, which one of those two guys would you hire? Well, if you're not planning on only serving soufflés in your restaurant, I guess the answer is quite obvious. I told you a bit before about that really great video with that guy using the Pete Best version of Love Me Do and actually analyzing that, and it's a really great video, and I thought, wow, he's really doing a good job. But maybe it's a bit overkill with leaving a mathematical proof, because I think it's quite obvious to hear